I will say this. I sometimes find the pride flag a little bit cheesy sometimes.
Yeah.
And then I remember its origins and what it was for. I definitely sometimes look at like the glitter and the flags and I'm like, oh gosh, is that a bit cliched?
Or is that going to off people without needing to them off?
But what's the alternative
Oh, yeah.
to hide?
Welcome to Thinkers on Times Radio, the show where we try and get into big ideas. We try and do a bit of nuance. I know it's unpopular. I know it's unfashionable. I know it'll never catch on. The idea is we try and spend a little bit of time and think through some ideas, challenge them, test them out with some people who've done some big thinking of their own. Today's guest is model, activist and author of the Queer Bible, Jack Guinness. As Pride Month begins, rainbow flags fill our streets, but not everyone wants them here. There's been some political movements in Britain. Reform UK, the party, are opposed to pride flags on council buildings. It's been part of the culture wars, flags actually, for some of the last couple of years, really. So where are we with pride? Where are we with flags? Where are we with this type of representation? Is it necessary? Is it more necessary or less necessary than it ever has been before? And Jack is here to talk about it also. Jack, welcome to you.
I'm very excited to have a nuanced conversation.
It's a dangerous thing. Well, we might not live up to it. We'll try our best.
I know. I'm quite scared that you said that I'd done a lot of deep thinking on the issue. We'll
Well,
see.
You've edited this lovely book.
Edited. You changed it from written to edited.
We have written a bit of it, and you
have.
edited the rest of it. And it's this great amalgamation of people's thinking on queer icons, I suppose. And I know you've written a piece which I read recently in Esquire, I think, about the flag. So should we start with the flag?
Absolutely.
So I think it is interesting, this question, which is, and you must hear this a lot, which is, why do we need a flag? Why do we need a flag? Why do we need pride? Has the battle not been won? Maybe we don't need any of this anymore.
The battle has absolutely not been won. I think for privileged white, like cis, non-trans men like myself, the battle feels like it has been won. I think we're seeing in America, even this very privileged group potentially have their rights rolled back. You know, there's talk in some American states of removing marriage equality. What's terrifying to me is the way that the discussions about a flag, like I love that we're going to have this conversation. It's very important, but that's not why it's in the press right now. The LGBTQ plus community and the flag are being used as a political football in order to score points. Especially the really poisonous rhetoric we're seeing against the trans community right now is about demonization. It's about separating people from each other. It's about fear-mongering. I think a few years ago, if you asked people in the street, you know, is bathroom access for trans people high on your list of priorities right now? They'd say, no, I'm worried about the cost of living crisis. I'm worried about putting food on the table for my kids. I'm worried about rising electricity bills. And this is a very important issue, and I'm really happy to talk about it. But what makes me upset is the reason why we're talking about it is because it's been co-opted by certain political parties and people in the media in order to attack a very vulnerable part of society who are a tiny percentage of the population.
Is there a fundamental issue, I suppose, that actually you talk about the LGBTQ plus community, and is there a danger actually there isn't a community of people, that you get feminist lesbians, for example, who have may well have a certain political view, a certain view of women's rights, a certain view on what women should be able to expect in terms of their safety, that puts their rights into conflict with the rights of trans people. So there actually isn't one cuddly community. There's just a bunch of people who may well have opposing political views. And the danger is that if you just say all LGBTQ people are lefty, soft, cuddly folk, well, maybe they're not actually, and maybe that's good, because actually it's okay to have spiky views that sometimes come into conflict.
The issue with the flag, where we're seeing people saying, I want this flag taken down, the perception is that it's somehow removing your rights by amplifying or making space for a part of the community. No one is asking for the removal of other people's rights. And I think that's a big thing. You know, it's a whole separate conversation to talk about access to bathrooms, which is a fundamental human right. No one's saying other people should have their basic rights or access taken away. It's about parity and about visibility. And to go back to your original question about the flag, the power of seeing a pride flag. You know, you may think they're a little bit cheesy. I do sometimes. And it's sometimes a little bit weird where they're plastered over, you know, banks and things like that. But there is a huge power. As someone that grew up in the 80s under the Conservative government with Section 28, which forbade the promotion of homosexuality in schools, which is a very deliberately woolly term, basically meant that there was no education about LGBTQ plus history, and most importantly, no education about LGBTQ plus sex education. And this is in the height of the AIDS epidemic. So there was a culture of silence. And because...
That was true even in the 90s. I think growing up, I think I had very little sex education at all.
At all.
But no one ever mentioned gay people, for example, except it was an insult, a kind of heartless insult. But, you know, I went to a boys' school where if you believed everyone, there was no gay people in a boys' school, which is mad when you think about that.
So imagine being the gay kid in that, which is who I was. So I grew up thinking I was maybe the first gay person that had ever existed, seeing on the news that being gay meant death because of HIV, and that the only time I heard the word gay was an insult. Can you imagine what that does to you growing up? And then you had a whole generation, especially of young men coming of age in the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s that hadn't had any access to sex education because of that Conservative government policy. So that resulted in people's deaths. Like, we can have a big abstract conversation about flags, but what we're talking about here is representation and visibility. The opposite of representation and visibility isn't neutrality. It's erasure.
And that's the central argument that you make, and I think that's really interesting. So your argument would be that if we lived in a world where no one had flags, and we just basically said, good luck to everyone, I want people to get on, I want people to be happy. If you're gay, if you're trans, whatever you are, good luck, you'll be fine. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to talk against it. I just want people to be happy. Some people would say, that's the ideal that we're looking for. And actually, by waving flags, you're bringing into people's attention difference rather than just simply recognising we're all human beings. We don't need a flag to distinguish us because we're all, at the heart, the same person.
You had a caveat there in what you said. You said that you want people to just get on with their lives, and I'm not going to speak against them. We're not living in that society. We are living in a society where people's rights are being rolled back. We're seeing in America, on government websites, on the Stonewall Memorial, they've removed any reference to trans people. We're not in that lovely utopian society, and I wish we were. When I talk to my trans friends, they say a very similar thing. They say, I just want to get on with my life. I just want to live my life. I don't want to have to constantly be making arguments for why I should exist as a human being. That's what LGBTQ plus people want to do. They just want to get on with things. But we don't live in a utopian society. We live in a society where there is a huge amount of hatred. And I actually think that your average person, and this is why I wrote the book is about a celebration of queer culture. Your average person doesn't really care about this stuff. Like, my grandma liked Liberace, my mum likes George Michael, and Elton John. And I think if we actually focused on what we have in common, yes, we're all individuals and unique and beautiful, but if we focused on what connects us, which is people just want to get on with their lives and live happy lives, I think that would make society so much happier.
The problem, I suppose, is, and you mentioned this question of bathroom rights and things like that, is in the world of, there are two conflicting parties developing. Put aside the argument that you believe right-wing people are capitalising on this. There are some genuine beliefs at stake here. The feminist women who genuinely worry about themselves being erased, their rights being erased.
Some feminist women.
Yeah, but they genuinely believe it. I think we have to give them the credit of saying they genuinely believe this. This is not, I've talked to people on this programme, they're all bigots. Now, I don't believe everyone is a bigot, and I don't believe everyone who holds a genuine opinion should be called a bigot. We might decent people can disagree as well, but they could make the argument they think what's most important to them is the right for biological women to compete against only biological women in sport, to have refuges which are only open to biological women, and go to the bathroom only alongside biological women. Now, there are trans women who would say, hang on a second, I have a right to do all sorts of other things, and those two rights are coming into conflict. Now, we can't argue that away, can we? Because they are fundamentally opposing points.
Sure, we can have a conversation about how we approach very delicate matters. We need sociologists, we need politicians, we need community stakeholders, we actually need scientists, like gender scientists and biologists to be having this conversation. I think the issue is that, especially like I'm aware that we're two white guys sat in a room talking about whether other groups should, what rights they should basically have, and that in itself makes me feel uncomfortable. I feel
the issue of rights are intellectually interesting for anyone to wrestle with.
Absolutely, but I set that foundation for our conversation.
I think that's fair.
What I would say is that I wish the discourse was as eloquent as you just framed it. It's really not.
No.
I think there are some well-meaning people that don't just hate trans people or hate LGBTQIA people, that have genuine concerns. I think for people that really want to work out practical policies that allow everyone to live their everyday lives and just go to the toilet, for example. Like, you don't have to worry about that. Imagine having to worry about where you're going to go to the toilet. Like, when they want to have those kind of meaningful conversations in a de-escalated, de-heightened way, I think everyone would be up for that.
But both sides, and I think, again, I can probably say this is not being part of any side, maybe, that it does seem that the escalation happens on both sides rhetorically. Some people feel the violence happens on both sides. And therefore, how do you de-escalate it? I don't know actually how, there's that great joke about the cab driver trying to explain on a journey, well, I wouldn't start from here. Well, we are here. How do you get away from here?
My brother described a funny moment the other day. He was in a cafe and there was a slightly older couple next to him. And the husband came back and he said, "There's a trans bathroom here. I can't believe it. We've got to go immediately." And the couple got up and left. And then my brother got up and went to the toilet and realised it was just the cafe's toilet. And it was just like a plain toilet. It was a toilet that everyone uses. So that was like such a simple little story that just got to the heart of, let's just have toilets that everyone can use. And in terms of like the sports issue, that is a bigger conversation. I mean, I believe that trans women are women. But
do you accept there's a biological difference between a trans woman and a biological woman?
There are definitely differences. I think and they're different lived experiences. Like, I've got trans friends that say that their experience, and I don't want to speak on behalf of a community or individuals here, but that their experience has been different and unique, and that there is a huge amount of beauty in that, and they don't want to erase that either.
I get that point. I guess I think with sport, the fundamental issue, it seems to me, is that actually playing competitive sport is not a human right. It's something that just needs to be managed properly. And there are biological differences between people born women and people not born women, which is puberty impacts bones and muscles in a different way. That seems to be relatively scientifically proven. And therefore, we need to have a conversation about finding the way through that.
What I would say is that our society's concept of gender is very narrow, right? Our society's concept of genetic sex is also very binary. There's some amazing resources out there for people to learn about the nuance of genetic chromosomes, of hormone development, of the intersex population. There are more intersex people in our population than there are ginger people with red hair, which is fascinating. So even our concept of biological sex is very binary, and it's actually a lot more nuanced than that. I also worry, and I think a lot of people are now realising this, that we're assuming the best of intentions. Often the result of maybe the path that you're talking about actually ends up as a way to police all women's bodies. And we're seeing that a lot, we've seen it a lot with sports stars, that if there's someone that doesn't neatly conform to what we perceive as a society in this moment in time, what a woman should look like, they're accused of being trans, of being intersex. They're subjected to all sorts of humiliations. There's talk of people having their private parts inspected. Yeah. This is very nuanced. This is a really big conversation to have, and it's not. I don't want to use the phrase binary, but it isn't as binary and neat as we work out. And we also need to look at the effects that that policies are going to also have on cis women. I've seen a lot of stuff on social media now about women who aren't trans being accosted in bathrooms because they don't fit our neat social stereotypes of what we think women should present as.
And so people like J.K. Rowling would say they're in it to look after biological women. Do you accept that? Do you accept the argument at least has some good faith in trying to look after the rights of women?
What I would maybe ask for a re-emphasis here and say that we have limited resources, limited time and limited political capital. Do we really want to spend so much time, as we are right now, talking about access to bathrooms when the things that affect women way more are domestic violence, sexual assault, which the trans community are way more likely to
everyone would agree on
to experience. But we don't talk about it. We're sitting here talking about bathrooms, and I think we really need to, if we actually really care about women and girls, we need to talk about violence against women, and that's perpetrated by men. That sounds very heavy, but
it certainly was.
It's true.
The problems caused by men, I think, that's an inescapable fact of life. 90% of people in prison are men. Vast amounts of the vast majority of domestic abuse perpetrated by men, violent crime, all of that stuff.
And often by men that they know, not strangers in bathrooms.
I understand,
and in the home.
I understand that argument. I want to ask you,
and that's not an argument. That's like I'm really not being I'm really just trying to focus on the real issues.
Do you understand? Because
women.
it's such a good point we're making about how real issues get obscured, and I feel I can ask you this because I think you will understand why I'm asking the question, which is, do you ever worry that there's a certain naffness attached to something like the flag, where it's starts off as a rainbow, and then all of a sudden it can't just be a rainbow, it's got to have this and that and other it, and there's something and it comes from a good place, but there's something inherently, to people who aren't in the community, they might just think, it's just a bit naff for my taste.
So the aesthetics of the flag are what offends you?
No, not me. I'm saying, I wonder, you saw people being uncomfortable.
I will say this. I sometimes find the pride flag a little bit cheesy sometimes.
Yeah.
And then I remember its origins and what it was for, that it was created in collaboration with Harvey Milk, who was assassinated, amazing queer activist. And then it was grown to include more colours, to invite more people into the community so they can be seen and celebrated and loved. And I definitely sometimes look at like the glitter and the flags and I'm like, oh gosh, is that a bit cliched?
Or is that going to piss off people without needing to piss them off?
But what's the alternative to hide?
Well, I guess the question is, because I'm interested in this, because I was looking at something like Asexual Awareness Day.
Right.
So the issues we're talking about with trans versus feminist women, they're real practical
and
concerns.
Lots of trans people are feminists and lots of feminists support the trans community.
I don't want to use trans exclusion. Do you know what I mean?
I hear what you're saying, but I just want to
I understand the
be
point.
exact.
All I'm saying is there are serious policy issues that need to be confronted or need to be talked about.
Absolutely.
Do we need to give everyone a label? Because asexuality strikes me as quite interesting, because if you're asexual, you're not interested in having sex with people, you're not interested in that part of life. Can't we not just say, good luck to you? There isn't really a policy thing that affects you. Why? But by virtue of adding you into the list of things, I wonder whether you dilute what you're trying to do, which is to say there are some groups of people for whom this is not just a lifestyle, this is an inherent part of who they are, and they face discrimination. Let's find ways of recognising them, making them feel seen, so we can have a better society.
Absolutely.
If you add asexuals to it, what you are doing is you're allowing people who are sceptics anyway to become cynics about it.
I think the worst thing we can do is not do something because we're afraid what cynical people might think. Like, none of the art or progress we would have made as humans would have happened. Also, asexual people do have to experience a huge amount of discrimination. In that asexuality, just as being trans and just as being homosexuality, is medicalised. So if you go to a doctor and you say that you're asexual, the majority of them will see it as a mental disorder, and then you have to go to therapy.
But why do you even need to go to see a doctor in the first place? I mean, one of the curses of the modern world is we pathologise everything.
If you're a teenager and you tell your parents you're asexual, they could send you to a doctor. I mean, conversion therapy for the gay community has just been horrific. homosexuality was classified as a mental illness. Before that, it was a crime. Trans identity has been seen as a mental illness, and now the medical profession has accepted it as a valid and very real experience and identity. And asexual people have a similar issue, that they're a little bit behind in terms of the advancement. What I would say is, like, we don't need to exclude people from legal protections because it might upset or confuse some people.
No,
There's an education issue.
I understand
there.
that, but do we need to include them by name? Because I think, because when you get down this road, it strikes me that the danger is you don't carry the room with you. And so you then have people, and we see this in terms of identification. People say, I identify as a man or a woman. People understand that. And then you have people say, well, I might identify as something else. And then you take things in some people's eyes, to an absurd extent, where you have countless people self-identifying in a load of countless ways. And what strikes me, the danger is that we talk about the wrong things, we focus on the wrong things.
Like we're doing right now.
Exactly, but we're talking about the situation as it is. I think that's right to talk about this. I think not taking the room with you, you could make the case, why should I change what I think for cynical people? I would say back to you, the world is run by cynical people, you've got to take them with you.
And that's what projects like the Queer Bible are doing.
Exactly.
They're about connecting us through our shared experience. You may read a statistic or see the phrase asexuality or intersex.
I think they're different things, though.
They absolutely are, but they're both added on to the end of LGBT.
Yeah, but one, I would say,
So you're allowing the intersex, but you're feeling
It's not for me. It's
icky.
not for me, and to say it. All I'm saying is, it's not really about what I think. What I'm saying is that the argument that you've made over decades, the correct argument is people should be allowed to be who they are. Stop being prejudiced against people, and that's carried through the civil rights movement, carried through the gay rights movement, and quite a lot of progress has been made. What strikes me is in the last 5 or 10 years, 5 years particularly, that progress is possibly becoming undone slightly.
But you're saying by a couple of outliers. Are you talking about stories where people talk about like kids using cat litter trays and stuff in school?
And stuff like that.
Right. Well, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm not a representative of the furry community. What I would say though is, is
that actually even a thing? Is the question.
It's not my place to say.
No,
I'm not.
But the danger is the fact that people, again, it's not. I don't mean to think this is me acting in bad faith.
You're
here.
playing devil's advocate.
I'm trying to say that in a world where these things can be talked about, I wonder if that occludes the serious issues that do need to be talked about, and actually you lose some sort of the ability to take the room with you. Is what I'm trying to get to.
I would say that the best way for us to create empathy and understanding and bring the room with us is through our shared stories.
Yeah.
Is through empathy. Is saying, oh, I didn't think I was like that person, but actually we're really similar. We have similar experience. More separates us than divides us. And that's the celebratory joy of the Queer Bible. You know, I've come on and talked about really serious issues. I think the fundamental thing is that more connects humanity than separates us.
Yeah.
And it's through our shared culture, it's through our stories of becoming that everyone can learn. A phrase I often use is like, the queer community have suffered so you don't have to. We've learned amazing lessons that we want to share with everyone. This conversation's felt a little oppositional in you playing devil's advocate. And what I would look for is, what is our shared connective space that we can stand in? And that is culture, and that is storytelling, and that's how you bring the room along with you.
And I think that's such a good point. It takes me to the last bit I want to get to, because I think the great triumph of human civilization actually is probably reading. Because when you read a book, you're simultaneously your own mind and someone else's active mind merges with yours. And that's, if you pause to think about that, that's just a phenomenal achievement. It doesn't happen elsewhere except in human beings. And so reading becomes a moment in which two people, wherever they are, wherever they're from, provided they understand the same language, there they come together. And that's what you've done with this book. And this book's sometimes banned.
Right.
And so I wonder whether we should just end on that, this notion that some people don't want you to read books. And again, that's happened throughout human history. It's happened at various inflection points. It feels like it's starting to happen again in America. I suspect this book has been banned in America.
It was banned in Madison County.
Okay.
There was a mayor that held back funding for the public library system until certain books had been removed from the shelves, and mine was one of them. It was insane waking up in the middle of the night and my phone was going crazy and Twitter was going mad. What's interesting, we started this whole conversation by talking about flags. Like, why are they important? They're important because flags are like the first kind of wink to LGBTQ plus people saying that you're safe here, that you're valid. And if we start removing flags, it worries me that we're on a slippery slope. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to end up pulling books out of libraries that people don't like and putting them in piles and burning them. And we know where that ends up.
And it's happening slightly more. It's happening in America. Weirdly, it happens in America, even in democratic governments. I mean, if you look at the history of book banning in America, it doesn't start and stop with Donald Trump. It's happened forever, more or less. Different counties in different parts of the South, particularly, they don't like anything anti-religious. They don't like anything anti-traditional family, and that's. But it feels like it's heated up again. That idea of what should children read? What should anybody read?
Well, my dad's a vicar. So I grew up reading the Bible, and there's a lot of stuff in there that is way more shocking than anything that's in my book. I believe you can't erase and burn ideas, and people try to do that. Like, throughout history, when people have been compiling the history books, they've often erased people's fullness of their identities. So they haven't included that person was gay or they were lesbian. Or throughout history, people have had to hide who they are in order to protect themselves. Visibility is so important because it allows the curious ally or the bully at school to feel connected to someone that they thought they weren't like. And then for young people like myself that were growing up in school, maybe under Section 28, maybe some new crazy law they're going to come up with in America where they were forcibly disconnected from their history, and they grew up and felt alone. Books like the Queer Bible, telling stories, flying a flag, let people know that they're not the first of their kind, that they are descended from the bravest, most fabulous, incredible human beings that have walked the face of the planet. And when we know our history, we can locate ourselves in the present, and then we can look forward to a hopeful future.
That's a very nice way of putting it. I was thinking my kids are 16, 13 and 6, and I think the stuff that they can read means they don't even think about this stuff. Actually.
Right.
They just think in the end, people are people. And the idea of, there are gay parents at my kid's school and no one has ever mentioned it. Like, it's not like they're welcomed. They're not mentioned because to a whole generation of people, most people have mums and dads. Some people just have mums. Some people just have dads. And some people have dads and mums and mums. And the world goes on. And maybe we shouldn't lose track of that as well, that things can feel a bit depressing, but ultimately things move on.
There is hope. And I come back to this point. People just want to get on with their lives. Mae Martin, the comedian, they wrote an essay in their book, in my book, The Queer Bible, which kind of ruined the whole premise of the book. The premise of the book is the power of learning who you are, of having a label, defining yourself. And Mae Martin wrote a really challenging essay that basically argued that we do need labels because when you're growing up and you're a teenager, you want to be part of a tribe, you want to know who you are, you want to self-actualize, and sometimes having a defined label is really helpful for that. Legally, it's really important to have labels so that we can offer protections for groups that might be marginalized. But as you get older, there's a beauty in fluidity, in maybe being like, maybe I don't need to hold on so tightly to my label. Maybe people that have views that might come against mine, maybe they can let go a little bit of those. Maybe we can look forward to a future where people are just who they are and they're just living their lives. And hopefully that is the generation that is being ushered in with your children.
Yeah, we shall see. It's optimistic. It's dangerous to be optimistic in this world.
Let's try. Let's try.
Why not try? Hey, listen, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. What an interesting half an hour we've had. This is what we've mentioned lots of times. Banned in Madison County, no longer.
No longer.
Overturn that, but you should have that on the front. Banned in Madison County. That's actually quite a good blurb. The Queer Bible, they're edited by Jack Guinness. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Really interesting stuff. If you want to comment, you know what to do. Go beneath the line. I know you'll want to be respectful and thoughtful. Do hit follow, subscribe. We'll be back with some more thinking next week. Thanks for joining us.